The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well this evening. And thank you for joining us on this lovely yet cold day here in Toronto, Wednesday, November 18th. Wherever you're tuning in the world, I hope you have warmer weather and nicer skies. But thank you for joining us today. We are going to be going over pre-listing inspections, the future of home inspections, and there's a lot of good content to come. Formality first, though. My name is Brian. I'm the onboarding and training specialist at Horizon, and you're certainly not here to hear me. So I'm going to shut up very soon, but I did want to mention if there's anything I can do after the session, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here to help out. And of course, the man of the hour, none other than Mr. Alan Carson, president of Carson Dunlop. How you doing tonight, Alan?
I'm doing well, thanks, Brian. And you?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. We've got over 200 people already in attendance, and we're looking toward hopefully 400 or 500. And so I'm hopeful everyone else is doing well this evening as well. All right, now I'm sure everyone has participated in a webinar at this point, especially with the year as it has been, but I just want to make sure everyone's familiar with how you can engage us this evening. First and foremost, you have the control panel, and you can expand it or minimize it using this little button. With it expanded, select your preferred audio method. If you ever have trouble with audio, let me know in the chat, but you can also select phone call. You'll get a toll-free number, dial in and listen by phone. Just follow the prompts. Questions, questions, questions. Of course, that's why you're here, to learn and engage. We would love for you to ask your questions at any time. They're going to be earmarked for the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer each and every question. Now, we've got a little bit of a bonus for everyone tonight. In case you're interested, we're actually offering 1.5 continuing education credits for these three associations as a byproduct of attending this session live. Now, in order to qualify for this credit or 1.5 credits, you're going to need to attend the session like you are now. You must have an attentive rating of 90+%, which means you're looking at the screen and not alt tabbed out. You must email myself at the email provided requesting the certificate, and they'll be provided next week. So if anyone's interested, they can follow up and get 1.5 CE credits for attending this session. All right, enough of me, and on to the man of the hour. Alan, be so kind.
All right, Brian, let me do that. Well, Brian, thank you for the introduction. Thanks to everybody for attending. You're going to be subjected to the better part of 90 minutes of me rambling on, so I might recommend that you grab a beverage of your choice and put your feet up and get comfortable. As Brian said, asking questions is part of the fun, so go ahead and do that. If I do a good presentation, I'll answer some of the questions that have already been asked ahead of time as I go through, but undoubtedly I will leave some gaps, and you will prompt me to fill them in or at least give you some kind of opinion. And as always, what you're going to get tonight is the world according to me. Doesn't mean it's the right world, definitely not the only world. Tons of different opinions about the topic for tonight. So I'm probably going to get you uncomfortable a little bit, probably going to challenge you a little bit. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. So let's get going. I've got a lot of stuff I want to chat about. So let me just set the goals for the evening from my perspective. I want to explore pre-listing inspections. And by the way, they come by several names. They're sometimes called seller's inspections, listing inspections, pre-sale inspections, lots of different names for them. They all mean the same thing. As I mentioned, I'll probably get you out of your comfort zone a little bit and challenge you, and I hope that's okay. I get this comment all the time whenever I talk about pre-listing inspections. Yeah, they're great, but they don't work in my market. We'll talk a little bit about why that might be and what you can do about it. The goal of the exercise to me is to get you more inspections. In the immediate sense, that's a big goal. In the bigger sense, what I'd really love to do is advance the profession. And I want to see the world move to 100% pre-listing inspections. And that's a pretty bold statement, but that's why the title of the presentation is The Future of Real Estate. And as you go through the session tonight, I think you'll come to understand why I think that's the right way to do home inspection. And you may be able to show me why I'm dead wrong about it. So let me start with a little story. And the story goes back a number of years now to a real estate agent, one of the biggest agents in our market that we had a pretty good relationship with, who at the end of an inspection after the client had left said to me, you know what, you guys are such a problem. Yeah, home inspection is a great service, it's invaluable, et cetera, but the timing is wrong. You guys mess up the flow of the transaction. You slow things down, you mess things up, you create uncertainty and angst in buyers. Why don't you do something about that? You guys are just making a mess of it. And my initial reaction was, of course, anger and resentment, and this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But the more I thought about it, the more I said, well, wait a minute, that's a fair question. Why do we do the inspection after the negotiation is completed and the deal is struck? Does it really make sense for people to buy something and then find out what it is they bought? And then what's worse than that is whenever you find out what you bought, and home inspectors always point out issues about the house. So now I'm not getting what I thought I was getting. So as a buyer, I feel badly treated and annoyed and disengaged and upset. And I had my heart set on this house, but now I realize it's not the dream house I thought it was. It's more the money pit. So buyers understandably want to renegotiate or sometimes just walk away in frustration. And so I agonized about that for a while. And I think we all know that at some level, that we do create discomfort for our clients. And a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to mitigate that and minimize it. But I finally said, well, why don't we do the inspection before the house goes on the market? And what would that look like? And so I want to chat tonight about what that looks like. And before I do, Brian, can I impose on you to run a little poll? I just want to find out, and I want to sort of gear my comments tonight to the audience. So if you folks can tell me through this poll what you're doing in terms of pre-listing inspections, that would really help me. So Brian, can you go ahead and run that?
For sure, sir. Just give me a moment here, please. All right, folks, so you have the options on screen. Currently doing none, less than 10, 10, 25. You get the jazz. Let's go ahead and vote. We'll give it about 30 seconds or so, see what we can get. Unfortunately, I believe you are held blind to the poll, correct, sir?
I can never see the polls. I don't understand. It's so frustrating. So that gives you guys perfect anonymity because I can't see what the heck anybody's doing. I can't see the numbers. I can't see the totals. I can't even see the questions.
Fair enough. Well, you're lucky that I made the question the accurate one then. We have got 75% voted. I think we've spent enough time here. Thank you so much. Last chance, folks, in case you want to contribute. Okay, we are done. Survey says, all right, sir. So we had 78% of our audience vote. And we've got over 300 people currently live. And hey, Brian, if you're a student, no problem. Lots of students here and welcome. Back to that though, Alan, 0%, 38%, less than 10, 49% of our audience, 10 to 25 was at 12, and then 1%, I think you're in a rarefied company, sir, at 25 to 50, and 0 over.
Perfect. All right. So that's fascinating. That's great information. We will carry on, and I'll keep those numbers in mind. So what I heard in round numbers was about almost 80% of you are either doing none or less than 10% of your work as pre-listing. So I think that tells the story. And just by way of counterpoint, we are currently doing about 50% of our inspections are pre-listing. We have been as high as 75%, depend on marketing conditions. And we've probably done, I don't know, I haven't counted, but 20 to 30,000 pre-listing inspections, probably something like that. So we've played the game for a while. We're still trying to get it absolutely right, but we do a lot of them. So we'll talk about what we do and why, and then you guys can decide whether that makes any sense or how you can improve on our process, which would be fabulous. So here's my agenda. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I've broken the discussion tonight into two parts. So we've got an agenda part one that kind of talks about the nuts and bolts of what it is and why it makes sense. And then part two of the agenda is kind of going to be our process and how it works for us and who pays and all that kind of stuff, and the what ifs and some of the considerations and the liability issues and so on. So bear with me while we go through a two-part kind of agenda here. And let's start with the basics. So what is a pre-listing inspection? Well, as the name suggests, it's an inspection that is performed before the house goes on the market. And the idea is to give a prospective buyer an understanding of what it is they're buying. And as inspectors, we do the same grade inspection we always do. We write the same unbiased report as always. And if you've listened to me before, you've heard me say that our loyalty is neither to the buyer, to the seller, or the agent. Our loyalty is to the house and to represent it as accurately as we can. So that's the goal of the exercise. There's an optional feature that can go over and above a standard home inspection, and that's a one-page summary, and we'll talk about that a little bit. There's a picture of one on the screen there, but we'll spend a little more time on that. Okay, I need to give a heads up to the West Coast folks here. And the first one is for people in British Columbia who are members of the Home Inspectors Association of British Columbia. And you guys have some special rules around pre-listing inspections. And that is that you guys are not permitted to share your seller's reports with prospective buyers. So the association rules are every buyer needs a new inspection. They need their own inspection with their own contract. So fair enough, that's a different rule. And then for folks in California, it's kind of the other end of the pendulum. And this is kind of the life of the home inspector, as the world looks very different depending on where you are in North America. So in California, it's the exact opposite of British Columbia. And in fact, there's case law that says that any buyer may rely on an inspection report done for the seller, whether or not they have a contractual relationship with the home inspector. So a liability issue that comes back to disclosure and substitute disclosure laws in California, and perhaps some influence from the real estate community. So a complex set of situations in both of these areas has led to very different market realities. So you may want to spend a bit of time understanding what's going on in your area with respect to pre-listing inspections. You may already know, which is great, but if you don't, you do want to make sure that you understand the rules of the game in the area that you're working. So those are a couple I happen to know about. There may well be other situations I don't know about. I'd love to tell you that I know everything, but that, even on my best day, would be a huge lie. So why do pre-listing inspections make sense? So here's a pretty simple explanation. I think the real estate transaction goes more smoothly. I think it's better for all parties. And when I say all parties, I mean the seller, I mean the buyer, I mean both real estate agents, and especially the home inspector. I think it's one of those rare win-win-wins right across the board. So coming back to the fact that the buyer's inspections are probably done at the wrong time, they cause problems, you can kill a deal, and believe it or not, they actually cause some stress for sellers, buyers, agents, and sometimes home inspectors. Okay, so we talked about this in the very first slide. So it doesn't make sense to me to negotiate the price, especially when you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and then set about to find out what it is you're buying. And then a lot of people want to go back and negotiate again. And to those of you who are Horizon users, you might be familiar with Action List, which is a very cool tool that actually allows the buyer or his agent to extract items from the report to go back to the seller with and ask them to either fix them, replace them, or give them a price abatement. So we have a tool for that in Horizon, but I think it's a tool that reflects the reality of the world rather than where the world should be going, in my opinion. So yeah, the buyer's inspections, I think it would be fair to say that we slow down the transaction at the best of times, and at the worst of times from the party's perspective, we just blow the whole thing up. So home inspections equal stress, probably a fair comment for a lot of people. Now, invaluable service, back to that comment, absolutely. Do I believe in what we do? passionately, but understand that not everybody loves the process. So I think a seller's inspection is easier on everybody. I think it's better. I think it's easier to schedule, for one thing. You're not in the middle of a 48-hour or 72-hour, or we're still a 24-hour kind of conditional time frame to get the inspection and get the results into the hands of the buyer, and then have them digest it and make one of the most important decisions of their life based on an inspection provided with very little time. So the scheduling is easier because it doesn't have to be such short term. It's not in the middle of a transaction, so it's not in the heat of battle. It's not under a microscope, in the spotlight, however you want to phrase it. It's done kind of before the curtain goes up and in a more relaxed environment. And one of the things that's great about pre-listing inspections is you have the time to get it right. I can, for example, never remember, should sump pumps have a GFI or not? Let me see, electricity and water, bad combination. Yeah, I want a GFCI, that'd be great. On the other hand, the nuisance tripping of GFIs on sump pumps is kind of legendary. So what's the right answer? Sometimes you have to go and look stuff up, and sometimes you might even have to get help from a third party to address a concern or a question. So it might be a structural issue, it might be a termite issue, could be all kinds of things. If you're not sure, in a standard buyer's inspection, you've got to use the dreaded further evaluation comment. In a seller's inspection, you usually get to resolve that question, so you don't need to clutter up your report with indecisive, vague comments. You can get the research done, get the answers, and put it in the report and feel comfortable. The other advantage is everyone gets a chance to agree on the report, and I'll talk more about that a little bit. And that's a company choice of ours. Not everybody does it on pre-listing, but I'll chat about that a little bit. Okay, I mentioned this already, about 50% of our inspections currently are for buyers and 50% are for sellers. And so we do thousands of inspections a year, and that's just the way our market breaks down right now. What else is great about a pre-listing inspection? Well, if you've ever been the seller of a house and your buyer comes through with a home inspector, and it's worse actually if you're a home inspector, but every seller is going to be nervous about going through a home inspection process. What's the guy going to find? Is he going to be reasonable? Is he going to tear my house apart? Is he going to nitpick it to death? It's a very uncomfortable situation for the seller. So this makes it a little bit less at the mercy of the buyer and their wacko home inspector. The seller in this case gets to choose the inspector. The seller can preview the report before it gets published, at least in our model. And the seller also has the option to fix stuff in the house to make it look better, show better, and stand up to the scrutiny of a buyer's home inspection better. So lots of advantages for the seller in this model. Now, again, getting back to the core of the issue, when you're in a negotiation, isn't it great if everybody has the same facts at the beginning? Negotiations just go better when everybody understands what we're talking about, and that makes a huge difference. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say with pre-listing inspection, here's two realities. Houses sell faster and they sell for more money, just because you don't have to go through that second set of negotiations. Buyers don't get cold feet because of what they found out at the home inspection. It substantially gets rid of conditional offers, so there's fewer delays, less uncertainty. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't bother home inspectors much that there are conditional offers, but for everybody else, it adds a fair bit of stress to the process. So tidy up is one way to look at it. So we've already talked about the absence of 11th hour renegotiations. And by the way, those are particularly painful because during the initial negotiation, the seller feels like he gave away too much. The buyer feels like he's overpaying. So both parties are already stressed and feeling like they didn't do very well in the negotiation. And then you have to go back and do it again because you've got this new information. The buyer's going, I got ripped off. If the house is not as good, the seller's going, already beaten me to a pulp. What is left for him to take? And that's how they both feel. It's not a great situation. So avoiding the whole thing of getting the negotiation done once and then you're finished with it is great. The other thing is you're not likely to have deals killed by a home inspector. And believe me, you guys don't feel it, but I'm sure you hear it. That people say, well, the home inspector was alarmist, he had bad bedside manner, he didn't keep things in perspective, he let the clients overreact, he didn't communicate well. All those things are kind of off the table. So you typically get away from the disputed findings issue. And that's where the home inspector brings the report back, the buyer or the buyer's agent takes it to the seller, and the seller says, that's not true, that's not how it is, that's not why my house is like that. And so you get into this, was the home inspection report even valid? And this way we can solve for that problem. We talked earlier about getting away from the further evaluation comments, the wishy-washy, I can't draw a conclusion kind of comment, and that's terrific. The other thing that's good about a pre-listing inspection is the buyer has a really tough time using the home inspector as his ace in the hole to get out of the deal. I don't know if you folks have been in the situation, but we've been there plenty, where the buyer misrepresents our report to the seller because they've got cold feet. And the buyer says, the report said this, when in fact, we didn't say that at all. He's just making stuff up to have a reason to get out of the deal. And that's a very painful thing, especially since we're not in a position to share the report with the seller because they're not our client. So hate that situation. Pre-listing gets around it. From an agent's perspective, and not all agents, a lot of agents, I'm going to say most, do not get this and do not understand it. And there's an education project to be done here. So an agent can actually get more listings or earn or win them by differentiating from what other agents are offering. When I go to sell a house and make a pitch to a prospective seller, what am I going to offer? Well, I'll get you the highest price. I'll put a sign on the front lawn. I'll advertise in the real estate newspapers. I'll put you on our website. We'll get a listing up. Not even do staging for you. They have a limited number of tools in their toolkit to work with. So a pre-listing inspection is a tool that they can use to differentiate themselves and bring more value to the prospective seller. The other thing I sometimes hear about pre-listing inspections was they don't work in buyers markets, they don't work in sellers markets, they don't work in balanced markets. And I'm going to say baloney. After all the years we've done them, we've been through all market types, and pre-listing inspections work in all markets. The seller's market one is fun, and we'll talk about that a little bit, because getting more buyers to the table is part of the game. And there are a lot of home buyers who say, I'm not buying a house without a home inspection. And in the crazy hot markets we've had in our town, a lot of times you can't bring a conditional offer when there's 5 or 10 offers being presented. All the ones with conditions just get ignored. So the buyers don't want to move forward without a home inspection. The seller's not going to accept a home inspection condition. There's no transaction to be had. However, if there's a credible home inspection report provided by the seller, the buyer can take comfort from that and move forward. Okay. What else is great about pre-listing inspections? Well, from our perspective, there's more inspections to be done. I think you'll find in most markets, there are more houses that are listed than are actually sold. So the pool is just bigger because there's more homes listed. Secondly, the house might be inspected twice, once by you on the pre-listing inspection and another time for the buyer. And we'll talk about how we do that, which is kind of a mini second inspection, or another home inspector or you might get to inspect that house again for the buyer. And then thirdly, another bonus is that if that seller is buying another home in your market, you've got a chance of doing their inspection too. In fact, in our experience, an excellent chance. Since they hired you to do the seller's inspection, they're almost always going to also hire you to be the buyer's inspector on their next home. So those are some of the advantages. Okay, so Alan, let me ask you this question. If pre-listing inspections are so great, why is that not the way home inspection evolved from day one? Fair question. And the answer is because in the early days, before home inspections were popular, and only an old guy like me would remember a time when 70 or 80% of houses didn't have a home inspection. But in the early days, the home inspection was the exception rather than the rule. And so sellers didn't want to disclose anything because the odds were nobody would find out about it anyway. Now that buyers are more likely than ever to get a home inspection, the seller says they're going to find out what's going on. I may as well be proactive and preemptive on it instead of being a victim to the home inspection. So that's what's changed. The popularity of home inspections by buyers now makes it sensible for the seller to go ahead and get the home inspection done. Okay, so I've said 75% of buyers get an inspection. I don't know if your market reflects that or not. I know some are higher, some are lower, but I kind of picked up that number, threw it at you. We talked about this already, that in a home inspection issues are going to come up and buyers are going to want them fixed or they're going to want a price reduction. Either way, it stretches out the process. And the question comes up from sellers and agents all the time when they're first being introduced to the concept. But wait a minute, the report's going to show defects in the house. How is that helping me? Again, come back to the point that the buyer is going to get an inspection that's going to show the defects anyway. And the reality is there is no perfect home. The buyer's inspector is going to find some defects. You probably can't hide them from them. And if you are, you're being dishonest. And frankly, putting the cards on the table at the beginning only presents the same information, but earlier in the process that's going to come out anyway. And quite frankly, when you lead with that, I think it helps establish the seller as credible and earning trust because the cards are on the table. I think that's a winning strategy, not a losing strategy. From the home inspector's perspective, and my sense is that you will have thought of this already, don't you worry about another inspector coming behind you, making you look bad. Yeah, I lose sleep about it all the time. Not anymore, I don't. The reason that we worry about it, I think, is misguided. The reason that you worry about it is because no two home inspection reports are ever the same. I think that's a fair comment. We've got 16 guys out in the field. If two guys inspect the same house a month apart, are the reports mirror images of each other? Of course not. Here's what needs to happen, in my opinion. Two inspectors looking at the same house should agree on the big stuff, the structure, the roof, the heating, the cooling, etc. On the rest of it, we're doing a sampling exercise, and this is the message home inspectors are not getting out to the rest of the world. We're not testing or inspecting every brick, every shingle, every electrical receptacle, every window, every anything. We're looking at the big stuff and then a representative sampling of the rest of it. Otherwise, home inspections would take 3 days and cost $4,000. So it's that sampling exercise that results in home inspection reports not being a perfect match, because no two inspectors are going to test exactly the same receptacle. So some guy's going to find reverse polarity, some guy's going to find ungrounded receptacle, whatever, but they're going to be testing different ones, so the reports won't look the same. And that's okay. And as a profession, we need to get over ourselves and stop worrying about it. And equally, we need to stop bad-mouthing our colleagues, not our competitors. They're our colleagues, because this is a profession. We're in a professional consulting practice, and we have colleagues. And so you finding something that your colleague did not find does not make you better than them. It's just that you had a different sampling experience. So stop being in competition to out-defect the next guy. It's not a healthy process. We need to elevate the profession, not tear it down. And so I need you to get over the fact that the reports are going to be different. We need to tell the world no two inspection reports are going to be the same because of the sampling differences, and move on from there. So in my opinion, when we do a seller's inspection and another inspector comes behind working with a buyer, I cheer for that because I say, hey, two heads are better than one. Let's get all the information we can about the house so everyone makes the right decision. It's not a problem. It's an asset. You just have to look at it properly. Okay, end of rant. Here's the challenge with pre-listing inspections in a lot of markets. Agents don't get it. Agents haven't thought about it, and when you introduce it, they have all those negative first thoughts. It's going to screw things up. Why would I want to know about the defects? It's because they're not thinking about the whole process. They're thinking about the front end. If you think through the process, I think I've already tried to convince you it does make sense over the longer term. We have to get that message across. We have to communicate it. We have to change the mindset of people who say, it doesn't work for me. And I'm going to go back to 1978 when we started. Home inspection wasn't a thing. In our market, nobody had ever heard of one. We brought it to the market. And what do you think the real estate community said? We don't need any home inspections. We've been selling houses for 100 years and everything's been just fine. Thanks very much. Go away. And you know what? We had a huge education. It wasn't a marketing challenge or a sales challenge. It was a huge education challenge. And I'm going to say pre-listing inspections is an education challenge. And people say, people are afraid of change. And I'm going to say, I'm not sure that's true. I think people are afraid of loss. Change can be good or change can be bad. And there's fear of the unknown because it might be bad. So the fear is I'll lose the sale or I won't get the listing. What we need to explain to them is actually they will win the listing and get the sale faster and for more money because of the anxiety and the slowdown and the renegotiations that take place in a transaction. So getting that message across to agents requires a concerted effort, and that's the education project that I say stands in front of all of us. And we have spent a lot of time, I'll talk about it a little bit more, but we've been working on it. The other thing I want to talk about is whether or not you should fix problems. So when the home inspection report comes out and the seller says, oh, here's all these things wrong with my house, what's their first reaction? Let me fix them so the report is perfect. And I'm going to say, absolutely not. Please don't do that. I'm going to say, leave your house exactly as it is. Let the report stand, put the report out there, and do this. Tell people in your listing information that the house was going to be listed for $599,000, but based on the results of the home inspection report, you've decided to list it for $579,000. So I just made up some numbers. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are because nobody can guess the price of a house, at least in our market, by $10,000 or $20,000. So adjust the price, don't fix the problems, and move on. That's option one, which is my favorite. Option two is the seller insists on fixing the stuff and asks the inspector to revise the report. And there's two ways that can happen. The first way is what I've got written here, which is the option number two, and that is the inspector doesn't go back to the house, but changes the report to say the seller advises that they have corrected these issues, and if the seller sends you invoices or photos, you can attach those as appendices to the report, but you're changing the report only to say, this is what I've been told. So you're not taking a position on it. Now, sometimes that's okay with sellers, but a lot of sellers want you to go all the way to option three. And option three is they fix the stuff and then they want the inspector to clean up the report as though the problem never existed. So that requires the inspector, for the most part, to go back and do a revisit. Now, that adds some time and it adds some delays. should you charge a fee for that revisit? I'm going to make that absolutely up to you. Some people do it for free as a courtesy, as a marketing gesture. Other people charge their fee for it. I understand that the only asset you have to sell as a professional consultant is your time and your knowledge. So giving away your time is a big deal to me. Okay, so I'm not wild about that option, and we'll get into the why in a little bit. So let me go back and look more closely at option one, where they don't fix stuff. And by the way, this is the toughest sell for both agents and sellers because they want to fix stuff. But here's the problem. It takes extra money, time, and effort to fix stuff. So it delays the go-to-market process, which nobody likes, especially if you're trying to catch a spring market or a hot market. If I'm a seller and I'm fixing something because I'm leaving the house, do you think I'm going to find the best contractor in town, or am I going to find the cheapest? And when I find the cheapest, what happens? He's cheapest because he doesn't show up on time. She's cheapest because she charges more than she quoted the job. Oh, we didn't know this was going to be here, so I have to charge you more. It doesn't work well because the contractor doesn't finish on time, or worse still, doesn't finish at all, or finishes, but the quality of work is terrible. So those are all the things that can happen when a seller tries to do a quick fix on problems because he's going to sell. So I would much rather they not mess with that. Get on with the listing process. Don't slow anything down. It's quick, it's easy, it doesn't cost anything, and there's no disappointment along the way. So this is a bit of a tough communication for sellers and agents in the early days. And we've been through this. And in our market, some agents and sellers still feel this way. But we have a ton of agents now who work with us all the time, absolutely get it. And the agents advise their clients not to fix stuff, and it works out great. It's just a steep hill for them to climb intellectually to get to that point. So here's a subtle reason why it's a bad idea for a seller to fix stuff. I don't know if any of you are familiar with all the studies that have been done, and there's a very famous one done by the Harvard Business Review that says people who buy a house spend more money in that house in the first 2 years making improvements than they do in the next 10 years. And the reason for that is it's not really my house until I change something in it and make it mine. And I call it a nesting instinct in people. But you buy somebody else's house and you move in, you've got to change something. It might be just painting, carpets, whatever. But very often it's something of substance. So it's not their home until they change it. So in a way, and we've had this happen to us, that the people buying the house are absolute energy fiends. And they are worried about climate change and carbon footprint and saving the planet. And they want a super high efficiency furnace. So a seller replacing an old beat up furnace is going to put in what? The cheapest builder grade furnace they can find. Is that going to be high efficiency? No, but it's going to be new and it's going to be hard to justify replacing it. Same thing with roofing material. If the people have been searching through the neighborhood for a house with cedar shingles, because that is their hot button, if the house has got a worn out asphalt shingle roof, what a great opportunity to put on a cedar roof. You get the idea. Even if the house has got black shingles and people want light color because that reflects the heat better and keeps the house cooler in the summer, whatever they're thinking, sometimes the buyers want to be in charge. And if they believe that the price of the house has been reduced to allow them to invest that money to make the changes that make it their house and give them what they want to live in, it's a win all the way around. Okay, option two, sellers fix stuff. We talked about this. The reporting that the seller says they fix stuff doesn't always satisfy either the seller or the prospective buyer. They really want it out of the report. So we kind of skipped this option, to be honest with you. And here's the one that we talked about already, but this gets worse. So if they just fix minor stuff and send you a photo, you might accept that and not bother doing a revisit. But for anything substantial, you probably want to go have a look. If you're going to make a substantial change to your report, you better verify that in fact the house reflects what you say in your report. So we already talked about the contractor disappointment issues, but they go ahead and they get the stuff fixed. They ask you to come back and remove the issue from the report. So you say, okay, and you go back and you either charge them a fee or you don't. But then what happens? You look at it and you say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, this is not done correctly. You've got to have the contractor back to fix it. Well, who's the bad person then? Not the contractor, it's you. You're the one who pointed out the issue in the first place. Now you're the nitpicky, uncompromising rascal who won't accept the fix. And that puts you in a very bad light. We try and avoid this like the plague. I know a lot of home inspectors do it. We try to avoid it. Okay. By the way, you'll find in the title slide, I had 4 options. I do have a 4th option that I took out because it's so obscure, and I'll just mention it in passing. And that 4th option is for the home inspection to have a trusted concierge or contractor. So when the home inspector identifies defects, the seller can use the concierge or contractor to fix the issues, and the contractor guarantees the work in a transferable way and stands behind it. So the home inspector doesn't go back and do a revisit. He takes the word of the contractor with whom he has a trusted relationship. The buyer is protected because if a problem comes up with that repair down the road, the contractor takes care of it. As you can imagine, that is a pretty tough relationship to find and to have everything work right every time. We have experimented with it. It does have some terrific assets some of the time, but it's just so hard to get it right and make it durable that I took it off the presentation. So I'm going to suggest that you probably don't want to focus on that too much. Okay, let's move forward and talk about the benefits for each of the parties, because everybody's got a different perspective in a real estate transaction. Everyone's got a different goal. Seller and buyer have obviously different roles. The real estate agents have different roles again from either the buyer or the seller. And of course, the home inspector's got a different set of goals again. So selling the home faster is really high on the priority list for real estate agents, and no conditions sure helps that happen. So no invasive inspection, no 11th hour renegotiation, and more buyers to the table, especially in a seller's market. Those are all compelling reasons for sellers to be engaged. Also, they get to choose the inspector. They're not a victim of the process. They're in control of the process up to a point. They get to preview the report before publishing if you guys choose to work like we do. And then they have the option of fixing things that are identified or not, and we've talked about that. They also have reduced liability because they have disclosed the condition of the house by engaging a professional. That leaves them less vulnerable to complaints down the road from disgruntled buyers who say, hey, the seller didn't tell me about this. In fact, he hid this problem from us. No, we hired somebody to disclose the problems. Let me touch on lawn signs for just a second, because I really like a lot of things about lawn signs. And when I talk about lawn signs, I'm talking the home inspector having a lawn sign that says the house has been pre-inspected by ABC Home Inspections. Now, some agents like them, some don't. Some agents don't like them because they want to make sure that their sign is visible and seen on the property. And additional signs can distract people driving by, and they want to be prominent. So some agents think they're a great add-on, some don't like them. You would probably want to be flexible if you're going to do it. I think it's a great thing. That's kind of a conceptual sign. Here's what our signs actually look like. You'll notice they're quite small, always smaller than the real estate agent sign because we don't want to compete or detract. The font is much smaller. So the agents find them an asset, but they don't want them to dominate the messaging. Okay, let's talk about the benefits for a buyer. Why are pre-listing inspections good for prospective buyers? Well, the big thing is transparency. They get to know what they're buying. They can move forward with confidence. They can negotiate price and all that other stuff, but at least they have a sense of the condition of the home. Additionally, they have enough time to read the report, reflect on the report, to make an informed decision. It's not panicked. It's not less than 12 hours turnaround. It's not signing on the dotted line as you leave the inspection, standing in the driveway with the agent saying, hey, you got to sign this waiver. It's not like that at all. The other thing is, at least again, the way we do it at Carson Dunlop, the prospective buyer can call the inspector and ask questions about the report and about the house. So we make ourselves available, even though we don't have any relationship with the prospective buyer, that they can call us and ask for clarification on items in the report. The other thing is, picture a buyer going out to open houses on a weekend. They might go through 5 or 10 open houses, and I can promise you by the end of the day, they get muddled a little bit about which house was which and what was the price and so on. So the pre-listing inspection report, if it's made available to them or a summary is made available to them, which we'll look at, it makes it easy to remember and identify the house. Buyers also love the fact they don't have to pay for an inspection. So it's cheaper and it's also faster because they don't have to arrange the inspection, go through the inspection process, wait for the report. They get the information up front. And so save the money and save the time. The other thing is, sometimes home inspectors find a bunch of stuff wrong with the house and the buyer goes, oh my gosh, I've gone through all this, I've done the negotiation, we've put up the security deposit, and now I don't want the house at all. So they've wasted their time and their money and their home inspection fee, and they don't want the house. A pre-listing inspection takes that off the table. Wasted inspection fees. Sometimes buyers pay for the inspection, but they don't get to buy the house, whether because there was competition for it, whether the seller wouldn't make the price adjustment or fix the issue that they had found, whatever it is, sometimes you just waste the inspection fee. And then the other one is missing out in a competitive situation where the buyer says, I'm not going to buy a house without a home inspection, and the seller says, I'm not looking at any offers with conditions in them at all. Okay, so benefits for the agent. Let's look at why it's good for the agent. Well, we touched on helping them get the listing in the first place by offering what other agents aren't bringing to the table. And then, of course, selling the house faster and for more money. But here's another one, managing the seller's expectations. Very often when an agent is trying to win a listing, the seller has a lofty price in mind of what he wants for the home or what she wants for the home. And so a home inspection report showing the seller that their house is not perfect can sometimes help bring the seller back to reality and get that house priced properly. The other advantage for the agent is the reduced liability. They don't have to make any comments representing the condition of the home, or worse still, misrepresenting it if they get it wrong. So their liability for disclosure is significantly reduced with a pre-listing inspection. And I've had enough conversations with real estate agents who have gotten sued that that is a concern for them. They worry about their liability. They don't talk about it much, but I do know they worry about it. The marketing tool aspect of sharing the report or a summary of the report at open houses, the lawn signs we already talked about, putting links to the inspection report on their listing sheets, on the MLS, and on their websites, putting it in any feature sheets or magazine or newspaper ads. They can help to promote the property by sharing information about its condition. And then lastly, why do I love it? Why is it good for the home inspector? We touched on some of these already. I get more time to schedule the inspection. I don't have such a tight window. I have more time to get the report right. If I need further evaluation, I get it done. And all of that yields less liability. So we get the chance to get it right, and away you go. Again, it gives you free advertising, in my opinion. I love when I look through real estate listings and I see in the little notes box, Carson Dunlop report available. I couldn't pay for that advertising. I love to get it. The other thing we talked about before is the chance for more inspections. So a second inspection for the buyer, or what I'm going to talk about in a little bit, an on-site review, or inspecting the seller's next home. So there are some pretty good benefits for the home inspector. Here's another one. If pre-listings aren't common in your area, it gives you a chance to have a competitive advantage, at least until your competition figures it out. By the way, in our market, our competition has figured it out, and almost everybody offers pre-listing inspections now. It also allows you to target agents who specialize in listings. And in the real estate community, there are agents who focus on working with sellers and working with buyers. So if you can focus on the agents who are concentrating on listings, you've got a smaller pond with better fishing, so you can shrink the size of the market and target it better. More potential inspections. Again, we talked about the fact that there are simply more houses listed than there are sold. So moving the market to pre-listing inspections across the board is good for the whole profession. So that rising tide lifts all ships kind of concept, that if we move this whole thing to every house that gets listed gets a home inspection, there are simply more inspections for everybody. And that's just at the top level. Then we talked about the additional inspections beyond that. Okay, so life is not a bowl of cherries or a box of chocolates. There are some challenges. So to me, one of the biggest challenges is if it's not common in your area, you've got to get a breakthrough agent to try it. You've got to get, and preferably a top producing agent, one with a good reputation. And you're going to have to talk to them probably a number of times. We had to get the message out frequently, repetitively, persistently. And as I talked about in the marketing presentation we did last time, you have to make it about them, not you. So you can't be talking about you, and you can't be talking about pre-listing inspections and how great you do them. You have to talk about how it's good for them, how they can use this tool to drive their business, and how it will make them the hero. And that is a fundamental marketing concept that, as I say, we did talk about last time. Okay, let's move on to part two. And that is, so how does Carson Dunlop do it? What is our process? So let's move through that a little bit. So it's pretty simple. We perform our standard inspection, we prepare the report. However, instead of publishing the report, we put out a draft report and we send it to the seller and the agent and say, does this fairly represent the home? And they may come back. Sellers often know things that we don't know, and you will sometimes want to change the report for the better. When I say that, I do not mean sugarcoat something, sweep something under the carpet, or remove something germane from the report. That is not on. What we do is publish the report when we all agree this fairly represents the condition of the house, and that communication is invaluable. Sometimes it's hard to get the feedback from the seller and the agent, surprisingly, and they want to move quickly, but they sometimes drag their feet getting back to you. But taking the lead on that communication is an important part of it for us. Now, occasionally, if we find signs of mold, for example, or we have issues, we sometimes need outside help. So we may get further evaluation. We may do it ourselves, or we may get somebody outside to help. And there are some examples. Because the report should be as definitive as it can. We don't want to litter it with a whole bunch of, you should really check into this, because that doesn't help anybody. It gives you an opportunity, and at Carson Dunlop, we do this all the time. So if there's disagreement about what is in the report, and this happens all the time, sellers don't really know what condition their house is in. And it's quite surprising to me, and it happens really frequently, that they say, well, that's not a problem with my house. And you sometimes have to, the photos help, sometimes you actually have to walk them through it. So that's a lot easier to do when we're not in the middle of a transaction with people on both sides of it. So you're not in the heat of battle. You're not kind of under that spotlight. So you can do that. If the seller shows you something or brings you new information or tells you something that you couldn't have seen from a visual inspection, then that may prompt you to revise the report. And again, as long as it's fair and represents the house accurately, that's absolutely on. And we do that from time to time. Not every inspection, by the way, not even close, but we do it. Let's look at report options. Well, almost everybody's using an electronic report these days, so that's kind of a no-brainer. But what we also do is we'll often do a paper copy that can be displayed at open houses. So the agent likes to have their listing sheet out very often at open house, and also a copy of the home inspection report. And so we do a couple of things extra. We'll do the electronic report that we always do, and then the clients can include a link to the PDF online, and prospective buyers can download it or look at it. But we can also do a print version of the report so that they can display it at the open house. We can do the one-page summary the same way. So we can do, and we'll look at these in a second, and we can do them electronically printed or put actually inside a bound report of the full house. Okay, so here's how our fees work. So our standard report for a pre-listing inspection is just whatever a regular fee is for buyer's inspection, same thing. If they want a one-page digital summary, and we'll look at those, as I say, in a second, we charge an extra $25 for that. If they want the digital summary plus a printout, the digital summary plus 50 copies of the summary to hand out at open houses, and those would be full color, we'll do that. And then if they want the full report inside a home reference book binder to display and leave out during open houses, we can include that. And that package is $50 extra. So those are options we do. Again, these are things that help us differentiate in our market. So here's what the front of the one, I call it a one-page summary, but it's really 2 pages, it's front and back, but it's one piece of paper. So you have a title page that shows a photo of the house. Sometimes we put 2 photos in, an exterior and an interior shot. We often include a link to get to the whole report, or a QR code. And by the way, QR codes kind of went away and now they seem to be coming back a bit. So with Horizon software, you have the opportunity to include those. On the back of the one-page summary, we provide, in the main left-hand panel here, and I know you can't read it, but I think that paper that we'll talk about that later. We talk about some descriptive items, so we give a little overview of the house, and then we provide a list of items needing attention. So those would be the conditions in our report, and we focus on the main things, and we sometimes group them to keep it short and sweet. And then we have a note about for the buyer that talks about to what extent they can rely on the report, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then in the right-hand panel, we have 3 marketing messages. The first one is, what's a home inspection? So it describes that. What's the summary report all about? It describes that. And then it talks about the Carson Dunlop difference, which is just our marketing message. Okay. And the way we create these one-page summaries is we have a boilerplate that we use in Word. We drop stuff into a template. The inspectors work on that. They actually send the photos they want to use and the Word document off to our office, who creates the PDF and publishes the thing in full color on that one-page format. So that's how we do it. This is all, the one-page summary, completely optional, by the way. It's something we do. Happy to share that concept with you. Don't feel prisoner to it at all. You can do nothing at all or something completely different. Let's talk for a minute about who pays for the home inspection. So there are a number of choices, as you can see on screen. And I wouldn't have guessed this when we started doing it, but what has evolved in, I'm not going to say in our market, but I'm going to say in our experience with what Carson Dunlop does, most often it's the agent who pays for it. And it's part of their package to win the listing. So they're going to do this, that, and the other, but they're also going to pay for the pre-listing inspection for the client. Now, the seller's still our client, but the agent's paying for it, and we don't care about that. So that is our most common. Now, sometimes the seller pays for it. The agent doesn't offer, but the seller thinks it's a good idea, so that happens. Here's one that some agents do, and they do it for a very strategic reason. So the seller is asked to pay for the pre-listing inspection report up front, and the agent agrees to reimburse the seller on closing. Now, why would they do that? The reason is that when an agent gets a listing contract, it might be a typical 60-day contract. If the listing expires, the seller might be tempted to try a different agent. However, if the seller knows that he's going to get his inspection fee back from that agent, the agents feel that they have a better chance of getting the listing again or keeping the listing a second time. The fourth option is the seller and the agent split the cost of the home inspection. And again, sometimes the agent pays on closing their half. So again, those are some options as to how the pre-listing inspection can be paid for. And I've told you what is most common at Carson Dunlop. Now, here's the terrifying part. What if the buyer wants to get their own inspection? Oh my gosh, somebody's going to come behind me and second guess me and make me look bad and call out all of my deficiencies. And we say, great, we encourage it. As a matter of fact, we promote it, and I'll show you where very shortly. Why do we like it? Because we believe it reinforces our credibility. As I said at the outset, we're going to agree on the big stuff, or you shouldn't be doing home inspections. And the rest of it, the discrepancies on the small stuff, are a result of different samples that are taken. And as long as everybody understands that, you have no vulnerability. So don't sweat the small stuff. And don't try to discourage people from getting their own inspection, because that makes you look insecure and defensive. So avoid doing that. And as I say, we actually promote it. Now, let's get to the on-site review discussion. I've touched on it a couple of times. And what I want to talk about is not really an inspection, but it's a walkthrough with the prospective buyer. So we've done an inspection for the seller, and the buyer has probably seen either a one-page summary or may have a copy of the report. But what we tell them, and I'll show you the wording very shortly, is that getting the report is really only half of the experience of a home inspection. A home inspection has two elements. There's the inspection itself and the report. And if you've got one of those, you've only got part of the story. So we say the on-site review gives them the other part of the story, so they have the big picture and they can make their appropriate decision. So it's a 1 hour, typically a 1 hour walkthrough with the client, explaining the house. And I think of it as a 1 hour course in home ownership. So we'll point out the issues that were raised in the inspection. We're not re-inspecting it. We're not going up on the roof. We're not going in the attic. We're not testing the furnace or running the plumbing fixtures again. We're not taking the cover off the electrical panel. It's a walkthrough, explaining the results of the inspection and showing people, here's how you change the furnace filter, here's where you shut off the water, here's your main disconnect for the electrical, here's your attic access hatch, all of that good homeowner-friendly, positive advice that home inspectors are full of. So we give people all that. We charge $260, which is a little bit less than half of our base fee. So there's a substantial discount. And so the buyer doesn't have to pay for a full inspection. And we generally send the same inspector who did the original inspection so that everything flows through. So to me, that completes the experience. But perhaps the most important part is that when we do that, we have the buyer sign the same contract we do with any of our clients. So it firmly establishes the contractual relationship and the rules of the game and the scope of work and what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for. So it provides real clarity. So we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Okay, so the buyer and the on-site reviews. We're going to get the same report ultimately to the buyer. It's going to be the same contract in an on-site review, as I mentioned, as it is in the original inspection. And then the question comes up, well, when is the report too old to share with the buyer? So if you do a seller's inspection and the seller then sells the house a year and a half later, is that report still valid? Well, I'm going to say absolutely not. So I'm going to make it your call. I'm also going to say, so yeah, should a report have a best before date? Maybe, probably. We don't put a date on it, say don't rely on this after this date. But in our market, it's rarely an issue because although I think I mentioned a typical listing period for an agent and a seller relationship is 60 days in our market. But in our market, if a house has been for sale on the market for 3 weeks, it's a stale listing. So our market has been very active, very hot. Houses get sold very quickly. There's no chance that report's going to be seen as out of date. I might say anything within 60 days I'm absolutely comfortable with. I might be comfortable with 90 days for the life expectancy of a home inspection report. I would not say I'm comfortable with 6 months or a year. So somewhere in there is my comfort level. You guys may have a different one. You ladies may have a different one. Not sure, but that's kind of where we land on the thing. But as I say, rarely an issue in our market where houses sell so darn quickly. Okay, so here's what we say. On that one-page report summary that we put out, we talked about this. At the bottom of it, we have a message for the buyer. And so I've blown up that message for the buyer. And here we are talking to the buyer who's looking at and thinking about this home. There are two elements to a home inspection, the inspection itself and the report. This report is helpful, but the inspection is equally important. You need both elements to make an informed decision. Call us to book an on-site review with the inspector or engage your own inspector. So here's what we're telling them: to go ahead and hire their own inspector. Our fee is $260. We don't know what their own inspector's fee might be. But then we say, without an on-site review, our obligation and liability are limited to the seller. So we are setting the expectation. And in our market, this has not been challenged in court, to answer your unasked question. In some places like California, the question has been asked and answered in the courts. In California, this would not wash. We also put something in the cover letter of the report, again flagged to the prospective buyer. And it's the same message. And I am very much a Jacqueline Suzanne fan, and you won't be old enough to remember that she had a book called Once Is Not Enough. So delivering a message one time and when it's important is probably not enough. So we put it in the report summary. We also put it in the cover letter. We strongly recommend an on-site review of the home to help you understand the inspection report and protect your investment. The review includes a tour of the home with the inspector, a complimentary safety recall service, by the way, we use Recall Check for that, on appliances, and ensures that you can take advantage of the special offers listed in the appendix, most of which are free. You also receive free technical support for as long as you own your home. The on-site review fee is $260. So we do some things for our clients that are additional services that are free. We can talk about those in the Q&A section if you want. Not a big deal. Okay, let's talk about liability, everybody's favorite topic, right? Okay, so let's first of all talk about the positive side of the liability issues. For the agent and the seller, the less disclosure that they make and the more that a home inspector makes on their behalf, the better off they are from a liability perspective. So they are more covered than they would be without a pre-listing inspection. And in California, there are very strict disclosure laws in real estate where the seller has to be very forthcoming to prospective buyers unless they engage a home inspector to provide that disclosure for them. And I believe the term is substitute disclosure, but don't quote me on that. So the inspection report takes care of the representation of the condition of the house that otherwise would be the responsibility of the seller. So the agent and seller are protected by that because they're not representing things. And well, we'll get to that later. I don't want to jump ahead too far here too quickly. Okay, so the inspector has some liability issues. And of course, they're responsible to the seller who engaged them, and that's always going to be the case. But the reality is, if the seller is selling the house, they're not going to be relying on the report, at least not for very long. So does the inspector have a huge exposure and a huge liability to the seller? In our experience, absolutely not. Rarely ever been a problem. The far more interesting question is, does the inspector have a responsibility to the buyer? And as you could see from the notes that we provided in the report and in the one-page summary, our position is that we are only responsible to the buyer if we have a client-vendor relationship with them, a contractual relationship with them. And so that on-site review creates that contractual relationship, and makes it absolutely clear that we do have a liability to the buyer. In California and in a lot of places in the world, there are people who say, whether or not you have that contractual agreement with the buyer, Mr. Home Inspector, you did the inspection with the full knowledge and expectation that the seller would present it to prospective buyers who would rely on your information to make their purchase decision. And as a result of that, you have a duty of care and a responsibility to the buyer. So, is that fair? I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to tell you the way we conduct our business is we look for that contractual relationship, but we understand we're not always going to get it. And in fact, well under probably 25% of our inspections for sellers end up with an on-site review. So a lot of buyers out there who didn't get it. My position is I'm a home inspection professional. I'm providing an inspection and a report that represents the condition of the property. Now, one party is going to be relying on my inspection report. It's probably not the seller because they're leaving the house, but someone will buy it and someone will rely on it. And my liability position is I'm always going to be responsible for my inspection reports, and I'm always going to be liable to one person who relies on it to buy the house. So in a buyer's inspection, that's a one-to-one. In a seller's inspection, it's a one to somebody I haven't yet met. However, I don't feel my exposure is significantly more. So we try to create that contractual relationship, but we understand that our feet may well be held to the fire by a buyer that we don't have a contractual relationship with. And we have decided that we are fine with that. So we'd rather not be in that situation, but we are every day of the week and have found not a huge number of problems as a result. So I would much rather have a contractual relationship. I would much rather have the opportunity to establish rapport in a relationship with the buyer. Not always possible. So that's one of the elements that increases the liability for the home inspector to some extent on the pre-listing inspection side. And as I say, historically, over the pre-listing inspections we have done, that has not proven to be a big problem. But I do want to make sure I'm clear about that, and I want to make sure that you understand it so you can make the best decisions for you and your business. Okay. Let me see if I can't get the slide to advance. Thank you, slide. Okay, so we've talked about this a little bit, but does the buyer have a right to come after you even if they didn't hire you to do the inspection? Well, the way the law works, anybody can sue anybody anytime for any reason. So yeah, absolutely, somebody can do that. And I'm going to say you probably, with some exceptions in North America, as we've discussed, you probably have two defenses. One is if you do a really good inspection and write a great report, that's your number one defense, first, last, and always. Secondly, you might argue that you don't have any responsibility to this person because you didn't hire them. And by the way, we have a clause in our agreement that says the inspection report is for the party named within, and we have no obligation to any third party. However, if there's a buyer who doesn't have a contractual relationship with you, they didn't sign that contract. So they have not had a chance to agree or disagree to that third party clause. So that does not really help you in the pre-listing inspection. So you can say, now, some people go so far as to put the inspection agreement with that clause in it in the sample reports that they make available for distribution for that reason. So I would say you don't need to go to that length. If you want to, you can just put in the sentence in the report that says no liability is intended to be offered, no responsibility is intended to be offered for third parties. Don't rely on it, whatever legal words your advisors give you. So you can do that. Again, whether that's effective or not quite sure. And of course, the more loudly you say, don't hold us to this, you might argue that the less valuable the pre-listing inspection becomes. So there's a bit of a fine line to be walked here. And so I wanted to make sure I addressed it, and I suspect we'll have some questions around that. So wanted to be absolutely clear, but I come back to the proof is in the pudding, which is to say, we doing it the way we've done it for a lot of years now, probably 15 years, we have not had a significant issue with it. Okay, let me summarize a little bit here. And I'm going to say, if you're considering pre-listing inspections and you're not doing them, there are a couple of success criteria that you want to focus on. One is you need to find some early adopters. You need to find some top agents willing to try it and hopefully adopt it. And they need to be open-minded, kind of leaders rather than followers, kind of first across the finish line type, the early adopters. Secondly, you need to make sure that your reports are credible. So they need to be believed by buyers. There is a temptation, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a couple of minutes, to soften up the report for the benefit of the seller to help them sell the house. You have to resist that. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So as part of my summary, I want to talk about the good stuff again a little bit, and I want to talk about the challenges a little bit, just to make sure that you have the picture as clearly as I can present it to you. So the good stuff. Half our inspections are for sellers. We're doing more inspections than we used to do as a result of pre-listing inspections. That's the either top line or bottom line, depending on how you look at it. I like the easier scheduling that we all enjoy because it can be at a slower pace because the house is not on the market yet. I like the fact that there are more inspections to be done, not just for us, but for everybody. I like the on-site review concept at a discounted price. It clarifies the liability, establishes the relationship and the rules of the game on both sides. And I like the fact that we might get to inspect and often get to inspect the seller's next home. If they're moving into a rental property, if they're moving out of our town, we don't get the inspection, but what we then get to do is refer that client to a colleague of ours. Might be another Horizon user in another town, whatever. Might be a graduate from our education program, but we have a referral network that we, if we can't help a client, we'll find somebody good who can. What else is great about it? I think the whole process is less stressful. And that's a more comfortable environment to work in. It's one of the reasons I don't do litigation work, and I've dabbled with it, but I really don't enjoy spending my day in court in the middle of people fighting all the time. And some parts of home inspection can feel like a battle. The pre-listing inspection process feels much less like a battle, and it's less stressful most of the time for everybody, including the inspector. So I like that about it. I like the fact that it cleans up the buying and selling process. And if you go back to the comment I made right at the beginning from the agent who told me the story about how we were messing up their lives and how we needed to fix it, I think it's a valid point. And I think streamlining the process without compromising and still sharing the information is a powerful solution. The win-win-win for the buyer, seller, and the agent. I love it when there's no loser, there's no victim here. Everybody comes out ahead. And that, to me, is critical to us bringing something forward. I think it's where the market is, certainly in our area, it probably is, and for the rest of North America should be going. And I feel pretty strongly about that. I think one of the other opportunities that it provides for you is it's a great reason to reach out to top agents in particular and start a conversation. Ask them questions. Are you familiar with the concept? What's your first reaction? What do you think? And then instead of telling them about it, ask them a series of questions, because It's great if they can convince themselves by you encouraging them to think through it and answer the questions about what about this and what about liability and what about marketing opportunities. And the whole story gets told through questions, and they actually feed you back the story as they convince themselves. Okay, I'm going to mention this in passing. I'm not going to go into any detail. There are some folks out there offering very creative services around pre-listing inspections, and I'm talking about people in the home inspection profession. So they've wrapped some very interesting concepts around it, all sort of built around the foundation of pre-listing inspections. And I'm just going to say that they're interesting models. You might want to have a look at them. They're not hard to find. So by all means, if you're familiar with them, you probably have an opinion. If not, and you come across them, worth having a look at for sure. Okay. Now, that was the good stuff. Now let's look at some of the challenges. And we've talked about them a little bit, but I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So make no mistake, everybody wants an absolutely clean report. They would love to have no deficiencies. You and I both know that's probably a fake report, but that is the layperson's impression of what they'd really like. The seller thinks that's what they want. It probably doesn't look at all credible, but they don't understand that. So that's going to be a challenge for you, getting the sellers and more importantly, probably the agents who are influencing the sellers to buy into that. So you've got to somehow address those unrealistic expectations that there is no perfect house and they should not want a report that shows no defects because it will immediately raise a yellow flag for buyers and buyers' agents. So that's going to be one challenge. The other challenge we talked about was if they want to fix the issues, oh gosh, please don't fix the issues. But when they do, and they want you to change the report, you are in a tough spot because you know that 50% of the time when you go back there, it's not going to be done right. They didn't fix the problem properly. They didn't do a good job. And now what do you say? You sweep it under the carpet and say it's fixed. Do you go back to the seller and say, this is not acceptable, you need to have the guy come back? To me, it's just a no-win situation so much of the time. It's also a challenge to try and convince people to leave it as is and adjust the price. To me, that's the most logical thing to do. But I'll tell you what, it's not the first instinct of sellers and agents. It takes a while to get that message through. And this is part of the answer to the question of why doesn't it work in my market? And I'm going to tell you it's a lack of education on behalf of the home inspection profession and individual inspectors who do not deliver this message properly or consistently. It's an important message. It's a valuable thing to do. It's the right way to do home inspection, and nobody is delivering the message. And people say, well, it doesn't work. And I say, well, it didn't work in our market either until we made it work by being persistent and communicative and educational and consultative. Not pushy, aggressive, hardcore sales at all. It was the education process. We did real estate presentations. We did everything we could do. We did one-on-ones. We did group sessions. We talked at conferences. The message takes a while to get through, but it's a worthwhile message. So we've talked ad nauseum about the believability of the report. I won't go into depth on that. But again, you have to be so careful that the report is credible. Other challenges. A lot of people who do pre-listings don't do this step that I've touched on. And I've made it sound like it's part of the process. I'm just telling you it's part of our process. And that is the draft report getting sent to the agent and the seller before you publish the final report. It takes some courage to do that because A, it takes a little longer. B, you might get some pushback. On the upside, the seller probably knows some things about his house that you don't know, and that's probably useful. You'll probably get some pressure. I'm going to say almost certainly you will get some pressure to soften or revise the wording so as not to be so alarmist. And interestingly enough, we often get requests to remove photos because people deem the photos to be disproportionately alarming. So I'm going to leave those to you as business decisions and say you might have some wiggle room in there, but do not compromise your integrity. Again, being careful because the report needs to stand up to scrutiny, and the ultimate person who looks at it and evaluates it might be a judge who says, does this report accurately reflect the condition of the home as it was at the time of the inspection, and what would a competent home inspection professional have said about this home on that day? And to me, that is the yardstick to which we should be held. Doesn't always work out that way in court, sadly, by the way, but that's, in my opinion, the standard that we should be measured against. So to me, the opportunity, I'm not going to call it a challenge, I'm going to call it an opportunity, is to get agents to try it. So I've talked about this, that we did lots of presentations, had lots of conversations. It does take time, it does take effort. You've got to find the innovators and the pioneers. Now, a couple of thoughts. One is that you might offer to do a free pre-listing inspection for an agent so that they can evaluate it. Why should they believe what you're telling them? Perhaps you should show them. So that's one strategy. Another strategy is to have a compelling handout. And I don't know if it's compelling or not, but we have one on our website that we make available to people. And Brian, I think we have that as a handout available. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So if anyone would like to check the control panel, they're going to see that there's a little handout section, and on that they can click and download the respective handout. It is the Carson Dunlop brochure, as Alan mentioned. If you have any troubles with that, you can certainly let me know. We'll include that in the email that we sent out on Friday with a link to the video, but it's there for everyone to check out themselves right now.
Thanks, Brian. So the other thing that I'm going to suggest is you might put together a one-pager for real estate agents that highlights the top 10 reasons why they might find pre-listing inspections a terrific solution for them. And what would you say on that one pager? Well, let me give you a starting set of thoughts anyway. So top 10 reasons why pre-listing inspections make sense. And this is focused on the real estate professional. Well, homes sell faster and for more money. No need to sell the home twice. And by that, I mean that 11th hour renegotiation after the buyer gets the results of the report. No controversial inspection results where the buyer and seller absolutely disagree on what the home inspector said. Those can all be resolved offline before the fact. Inspector style and client overreaction is not an issue. So I have heard so many times, there's nothing wrong with this house. The home inspector didn't pull the client back from the cliff. The home inspector did not keep things in perspective well enough. The home inspector was not a good communicator. So this argument and this frustration just disappears in a pre-listing inspection scenario. It gives the seller and agent more control of the process, not absolute control, but more control. It allows them to choose an inspector and allows them to review the report and provide some input where they think it's factually inaccurate or incomplete. Okay, items 6 to 10 on the top 10 reasons why pre-listing inspections make sense. Number 6, it helps you earn the listing or win the listing when you're competing with other agents to work with the seller and you're the only one providing the service. It gives you another arrow in your quiver. You can adjust the price or fix the issues. You have that flexibility, understanding there will be things that come up in a home inspection that are opportunities for improvement. You can bring more buyers to the table, especially in a super competitive market where conditional offers are not generally going to work. And so that absence of conditional offers in any kind of a market is better for the seller because it's cleaner, it's faster, it moves through, and you get to either yes or no more quickly. And lastly, the reduced liability for you, the agent, and for your seller, because you're not being asked to make any representations about the condition of the property. Okay, so that's a starter kit for what you might do as a one-pager to try and communicate the benefits of pre-listing inspections. And this, instead of being a list that you deliver, as I've shown here, might be a series of questions that you ask to top agents to have them think it through and come to the right conclusion on their own. Okay, that would be a really good time for me to stop talking. We're coming up to an hour and a half. A couple of things. Before we go to questions, which I'm excited to do, I want to get some help from you. We're going to take December off because I'm tired and I'm lazy. We're going to come back in January, and we've got a bunch of ideas for what the next topic ought to be. But I thought maybe we should get some input from you folks. You get to be subjected to what I think all the time. I'd love for you to provide some input on that. So you're always welcome to shoot Brian or myself an email or send us a note in whatever fashion about any thoughts you have for topics. But I thought we might kind of spice the discussion with a little bit of a poll. Brian, do we have another poll that we can do?
We certainly do. Now, two things, folks, for people who are still attending. We've got over 300 in attendance around now. We are going to have a half an hour Q&A. So if you'd like to stick around, those are going to be 30 minutes of Q&A. Ask your question now. We'll do our best to address them as efficiently as possible. With regard to the poll, we're going to get that launched right now. Alan, do me a favor. Check your cell phone for a message I sent you, please. All right, folks, so you're going to have approximately 30 to 45 seconds to address what events you would like in 2021. And hopefully they're going to be, this is multiple choice as well, so select all that you'd really be interested in, but I mean, the key ones will be perfect for us.
And as usual, I can't see what's going on. So frustrating. While you're doing that, I did want to give a little shout out to Tanya, Mike McRae's wife. Apparently it's her birthday today, and what a great thing to be doing. She's sitting with him so he doesn't miss tonight. So that sounds like a pretty amazing relationship. So happy birthday, Tanya, and thank you for taking care of Mike.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Alan. And we've got our poll results here. Let's see what people would like to know about. All right. So guess what? 60% survey says more best practices, more technical talks. There's a mixture, but we're going to have to analyze that in-house, and we're going to come back to you with a schedule for 2021 that is going to knock your socks off. All right, Alan, let's get to some Q&A. Now, as far as icebreakers here, Alan, you know, a lot of people mentioned, 2020 is time for style changes, and a lot of people noticed you have a bit of a style change here tonight. Are you a fan of the Grateful Dead by chance?
I am a huge fan of the Grateful Dead, as it turns out, and a whole bunch of other people like Neil Young and Tom Petty who all have hairstyles not too different. And yeah, I have avoided going to the barber for COVID. I have a wife who is significantly compromised, and she is very nervous. So I have been staying out of the public eye and definitely away from barbers. Although I've got a 23-year-old daughter who is sick and tired of me looking like a hippie, and is trying to convince me to go and get my hair cut. So I'm agonizing over that, and believe me, it's if that's the toughest thing that's happened to me throughout 2020 and COVID, I really can't complain too much. It's been a tough year for so many of us. So yeah, not my choice of hairstyles, but kind of stuck with it for the short term anyway.
Thank you so much, sir. And you know, some of these questions we're about to ask, you may just want to, I know we've already talked about them, so if it's just a quick answer, that's fine. Get to the meat of the potatoes of some of the other ones. But so earlier on in the conversation, Wayne had mentioned that the law in Alberta is the same as BC. So you're talking about HIBC, and so any comments with regard to that?
I think that's unfortunate, but you have to deal with the market that you're in. I either didn't know that or I'd forgotten it about Alberta. And to be honest with you, my understanding from a couple of people in British Columbia is I think the thing was predicated on a lawsuit where a buyer relied on an inspection report that was done for a seller and had a problem with the house and sued the inspector, and the inspector lost. So I think that made people nervous about the process. I'm going to say I'm not sure I would have come to the same conclusion that you can lose a lawsuit for almost any reason. And to be honest with you, I think it's a shame and I don't agree with it. But you have to respect the regulatory environment in which you work. So yeah, I have opinions about it. I don't think it's fair. I also don't think what's happened in California is fair. Also the result of a lawsuit, by the way. But the reality is the reality, and got to deal with it.
Thank you, Alan. And Chris would like to know, so just in terms of Carson Law, you don't charge differently, do you, for a pre-listing inspection versus, say, a typical buyer inspection, right? What we call the norm?
That's correct. Same fee for the same inspection, yeah.
And the only difference would be then you have some advantages to upsell those summary sheets and things that you were talking about, where on a buyer's, you wouldn't necessarily have that. There'd be alternatives.
Yeah, we wouldn't offer the one-page summary for a buyer. There would be no reason to. So yeah, we do have those two add-ons. So you can have the one-page summary, or you can get the report printed out and put into a home reference book binder, as well as getting 50 printed pages of the summary. So yeah, those are optional features. I don't call them upsells. We don't try and sell people on them. They're only in existence because agents asked us for them. And some agents take advantage of them and some don't. So my business philosophy is that whatever I think about running our business is secondary to what our customers are looking for. And as long as I can provide solutions and meet their needs, and as long as I can do it ethically and provide real value, I'm going to be driven by what the customer is looking for rather than what I think is right in a lot of cases. And that's an example of that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. And Christopher would like to know, in terms of tight timelines, short deadlines, as far as closing, can an actual PLI or pre-listing inspection fit into the seller's process, right? Everything's so constrained for time. Does it make sense?
I don't see that as a huge challenge. Generally speaking, when people are getting their house ready to sell, the decision is made, the agent's engaged, and at least in our market, the houses are very often decluttered a little bit, cleaned up. Sometimes rooms are painted. Sometimes the furniture is staged. So the decision to list and the actual sign going on the lawn is generally a process of 1 to 3 weeks, which is way more time than you have to do a home inspection in a typical pre-purchase environment where you might be dealing with 48 hours, 72 hours for an inspection. So it's quite different that way.
Thank you. Dave would like to know, is there any backup data analytically about the claims that homes sell for more, right, or sell faster when you get a pre-listing inspection?
Yeah, there is, but it's not published data, and I can't share it because it's proprietary to Carson Dunlop. But we did a survey after we followed our pre-listing inspections, and the real estate community provides an average days on the market report for how long houses sell and the percentage of the percentage of the listing price that the sale price is. So we track that. It's been a few years now since we've done it, but we did a study and we compared it to our numbers for the houses where we had done a pre-listing inspection. And to be honest with you, I've forgotten the number on how much more money, but the days on the market, it was 34% less on average days on market for a house to sell that had a pre-listing inspection. And the price difference, I think it was 3% more, that houses sold for 3% higher than the average sale to listing price ratio. Now, and again, it's been a while since we've done it, and we never did publish the numbers, and I was never comfortable doing it because it wasn't a sample of 5,000. It was a fairly small sample of a few hundred sales. So I wouldn't say it's statistically valid, so I wouldn't put it out there in the public. But we did convince ourselves that it was an absolute truth, and so we're comfortable saying it. But I can't put that data into your hands for you. And I've never seen any published data, by the way, on that. It's pre-listing inspections is still a pretty specialized thing.
Thank you, Alan. Daryl would like to know, all of what you said is fine and good. It's really encouraging, but in my market, agents are reluctant to spend the money or try to convince their clients to maybe split as you proposed, right? Or get it back after the sale. All right. So those are hurdles that I have to overcome. Any suggestions? Now, I will preface this by saying that I know Daryl is in Florida. There's the 4-point as an alternative things, which may muddle things a little bit, where you can have the selective inspection. Any thoughts on all of that by chance?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very typical, and the agents don't want to spend the money because they don't see the benefit at first glance. So it comes back to that communication and education. And I think for the agents who say, I don't want to spend the money, I might ask them, so what is a listing worth to you? How much would you spend to get a listing? And depending on how the real estate commission split, what do you think a typical real estate commission is? It's in the thousands of dollars, right? And in our market, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. So would you spend, and our fees average a little over $600. So would you spend $600 to make $10,000? I would. So if you don't get the listing, you don't have to pay to do the pre-listing inspection. So it's money that you spend after you've won the listing. So if I'm working in Florida and pre-listing isn't a thing in my area, you need to find a realtor with a fire in their belly who is willing to listen and willing to try something new and brings that to market, because there's almost no cost to them. There's almost no risk. Unless they were going to get the listing anyway, in which case they've wasted the inspection fee. But even so, they get the listing, the house sells, they get their commission. It's a thousands of dollars versus hundreds of dollars investment. Why would you not do it? So I understand it's a bit of a process, but the logic, believe me, we have a top producing agents in our market, the smartest, most successful agents, the ones with teams, the ones who have been around a long time, and the ones who control. I've talked about this before, the 80-20 rule in real estate. So 80% of the deals get done by the top 20% of people. Those are the people you need to talk to. And in our market, those are the people who believe in pre-listing inspections. The agents who do 1 or 2 deals a year and are fringe players, they're never going to get it. They're never going to figure it out until everybody does it. And we're somewhere, we're not at everybody yet, but we're where most of the top performers do it. That's where you need to get to. And I encourage you to use some of the tools we've talked about tonight, to be patient, to be educational and communicative. I think you can get there. I don't know anything about the Florida market that would get in your way, including the 4-point thing.
As candid and as truthful as ever. We appreciate that so much, Alan. Wayne would like to know, and Wayne, I believe he's new to the industry. And
Welcome.
let me ask you, yeah, indeed, welcome to the industry and to the Horizon community for that matter. And again, you might have touched on these things a little bit earlier, but just as a good recap in certain circumstances, the pre-listing may uncover things, right? And as a result of that, could it not potentially affect the value, right? So you get the pre-listing inspection done, you uncover certain nasty things, it could affect the value. What do you think is going to happen in that regard? Like, are they supposed to repair things? Are they supposed to get things remedied before? Like, are they going to release the report? So what's your take on that, right?
Well, if I'm going to take the well-informed, sophisticated response to that, it's going to be, thank goodness we discovered it now, rather than have a buyer discover it during a pre-purchase inspection after he had already negotiated the sale. Because it almost certainly would either ruin the sale or result in a significant renegotiation. So I would give the seller and the agent the options of saying, You can either correct the issue, and if it's a big significant one, they may want to go ahead and do that. And that's everybody's first instinct, is to go ahead and fix the problem. They may want to do that. Or you can say, you can leave the issue and adjust the price and disclose that and move forward. And where people have to get their head around is, oh my gosh, a pre-listing inspection found a problem. Well, that's good news, because the buyer's inspector was going to find that problem and blow up the deal. You'd rather be in control, making the decision, instead of have this land in your lap and thrown in your face just when you were starting to count the money from having sold the house, and then find out, in fact, you haven't sold it. I think it's a different way of looking at it. It takes a while to get your head around it, but you have to tell people, you have to explain to them that that's actually a good thing to discover it now, not in the midst of a transaction negotiation.
Thank you, Alan. And Rob would like to know, I've had people contact me for a pre-listing inspection or short PLI, who are then talked out by their realtors who told them, if they know a problem exists, you're legally bound to fix those problems or at least disclose them. Right?
Yes. I don't think you want to work with that part of the real estate community. What you're hearing there is, hear no evil, see no evil. I don't want to know if there are any problems with the house. Well, what's going to happen? And again, you may be working in a market where home inspection is not a thing, but there aren't very many of those markets left in North America. So that agent, to me, is not an experienced or big picture agent, because the buyer is going to find the stuff. The buyer's home inspector is going to reveal the condition of the house. And so the ostrich strategy of sticking your head in the sand and saying, don't do a pre-listing inspection because it might bring up some defects and then I would have to tell everybody about them, completely misses the point for me. So I'm old enough to say that I'm crotchety and I don't have very much patience with that kind of approach, but I really don't. I don't think that's a winning intellectual approach to selling real estate.
Thank you, Alan. And Chris would like to know, well, not so much a question, but I guess question to an extent. This is great content, and I've got realtors in my area that just need to know, right? They need to buy in. They need to. Is this going to be available for people to watch after the fact? And if so, where?
Brian, I think you can answer that question pretty well.
I was hoping that you would just promote the YouTube channel right there, but you've got it. In our follow-up email, we will post our YouTube channel, and there will be a video available as of Friday, so everyone can check that out, including all of your realtor friends. In fact, we are trying to gain more of a audience rather on our YouTube channel, so feel free to subscribe, everyone, when we send out the link, and we'll have hundreds of videos to come in 2021. So stay tuned. Okay,
Brandon,
now, pardon me, sir.
Before you go on to the next question, I did want to jump in and say, Brian makes a great point. And as you've probably gathered, I do this, the price for attending these webinars is the right price, which is no price at all. And the reason that we do it is, as you can probably tell, I'm a little bit passionate. I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the importance of it. And we do this to get the word out to our community, and I would love to get it to all the allied profession communities. So absolutely feel free to share this. And people are going to disagree. People inside the home inspection profession are going to disagree with me all the time. But I think healthy disagreement about the issues is absolutely terrific. So I don't mind starting a spirited discussion. I don't mind losing an argument. I love to be in the discussion, and I think we need to do a much better job of telling the world about home inspection. And I think it starts with things like our YouTube channel. So spreading those around, providing reviews, providing opinions, adding comments to the YouTube videos. The more communication we have, the stronger we get. So I can't I can't ask you emphatically enough to please absolutely go look at the videos, circulate the videos, share the thoughts around, and let's start some discussions. And yeah, I can't imagine a real estate agent sitting through an hour and a half of me rambling on about it. But if you can take what we've talked about tonight and turn it into something that's your own video, that's a message that you can provide in your community one way or another, by all means, feel free, please do it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. And Michael would like to know, so what if a buyer then ultimately gets their own inspection, right? And they find more problems? I think you sort of touched on this, it's a sampling, right? But does the first inspector, AKA I guess you guys, open it up to potential lawsuits?
There is that risk, but you're open to potential lawsuits every time you do a home inspection and the buyer moves in and finds stuff you didn't find before. What's the difference? How is your liability any greater? So the second inspector finds something. In the first place, I go back to my argument about if it's the big stuff. If you said a worn out roof was in great shape, you may need to go back to school or you may need to find a different profession. If you didn't pick up a sticking window or some deteriorated mortar work on a second floor, around a second floor window, I go, so what? Those are sampling differences. And so, yeah, there are always going to be some differences. He found some stuff I didn't find, and you probably found some stuff that he didn't. If he was following along your report, he obviously found everything that you found. But we have to get over that. Stop worrying about the guy coming behind you, making you look like an idiot and getting you sued. Your clients are going to sue you if you screw up. Don't screw up. And don't worry about the minor differences. They're going to be there 100% of the time because you're not checking exactly the same windows in every house or testing the same outlet with your pacifier. I mean, electrical tester. Sorry, that's a different presentation altogether. I'll get to that another time. So yeah, I don't think you can go through life worrying about what the guy behind you might say about you, might say about your report.
Thank you, Alan. And Carl would like to know, do you find that sellers find it difficult to sort of cough up the fee, if you will, for the inspection themselves, right? You mentioned that a lot of the time the agents do it. Sorry,
Brian, I missed a couple of words in that question. Your internet just cut out or my internet just cut out. Can you just say that again?
No, sorry, my dog is going a little crazy in the background. I had to try to ninja mute those interactions. Okay, sorry, my apologies. So with regard to sellers, do you find that it's difficult for them to sort of pay for the inspection fee themselves? You said the bulk of it is the agent, right? But also at times the sellers will do it. Do you feel there's pushback on that regard?
No, it hasn't really been, and we don't, it's funny, I've done a lot of real estate presentations around this topic, and the agents will tell me or will ask me, who do you think should pay for it? And I said, I can't tell you how to run your business. I can tell you, here's some different things that we've seen, but I would never tell an agent, oh, you should be paying for the pre-listing inspection, or you should have your seller pay for it. That's not our place. That's not our role. So I would stay away from that topic about who pays for it. If you get asked directly, I would simply defer to, I don't have a position on it. Here's what I've seen in the market. Here's how different people do it. But I shouldn't be telling you how that should be handled. So I think home inspection's complicated enough. And every time I try and wade into another profession, I am reminded that I shouldn't. So that would be an example of that. So telling agents how some people do it is as far as I would go, and certainly not go any further.
Thank you, Alan. And Clyde has a combo question. Is the contract that you would send to a seller the same as the buyer? And
yep.
Do you provide the report online with the same time as the listing? So is your report published online in sort of in unison with the listing? So when it goes on to, I guess, realtor.com, MLS.ca, whatever, I'm not sure for the US, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's Zillow and there's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, the report is published at the time of listing. We don't post it online in a public format. The agents may do that, but in Horizon, our report is a PDF that's accessed electronically. And so, yeah, how agents make it available to people is up to them. But yeah, it's typically included with the original listing at the time of listing to their audience.
Thank you so much, Alan. Okay, Nelson would like to know, when marketing to agents, what are the key factors that you have found to be successful in your marketing materials to help open agents' eyes to their benefits? Great question, Nelson. Thank you for that.
That's a great question. And what I'm going to tell you is that's how I came up with this list of 10 things. So in the presentation right at the very end, and when you get your copy on YouTube, you'll be able to drill down. These are the things that I have found that struck a chord with real estate agents. Not all of them with all agents, but this top 10 list. And remember, I said rather than just handing them this list, perhaps if you can do it in the form of a discussion and asking them questions like, you know, have you ever been stuck in a situation where the buyer wants to renegotiate after the original inspection? I mean, in so many markets in America, it's just the way it's done. There's always a renegotiation. I can't believe anybody loves that process. It's why we created the action list feature in Horizon. But to me, it's all unnecessary. It's become the norm in so many markets. But to me, it's just wrong and wasteful of time, and creates bad will, slows things down, gets in the way. Yeah, so I would go through these. I would pull out the ones, and again, understanding not every point is going to resonate with every agent, but that would be the crux of what I would use in communicating with agents about. And again, once is not enough. You're going to have multiple conversations to get people to fully understand and absorb the message here.
Thank you, Alan. And Wayne would like to know, and first, Wayne, never a silly question, especially if you're new to the industry and trying to get some clarity here. But being new to the industry in general, as I work through the program, can I ask, is the home inspection certifications and inspections, so like what's needed for errors and omissions, right? Is that something required right out the gate? Is my certificate sufficient? Give me some context on what you would recommend outside of the Carson Dunlop education course.
I'm a believer in errors and omissions insurance. I think right out of the gate makes sense. I understand that it's an additional expense for people getting started. I understand, you know, $2,000 to $3,000 a year for E&O insurance. There is a product in the States that I believe is still available on a per inspection basis, but I think it ultimately becomes, you know, as expensive as the other approach or more. The reason I say right out of the gate is there is no substitute for experience. And when you're first starting, you don't have all the experience in the world. You might have terrific education and great systems to work with, and you might even have great in-field trainers and mentors and so on, which is a blessing. But you are more vulnerable in those early inspection experiences in the first year or two. So I think the E&O insurance does make sense right out of the gate for sure.
Thank you. And in regards to at least Canada, I'm not sure if you can speak on the US of A, are pre-inspections legal?
With pre-inspections, as far as I know, are legal everywhere. The constraint in BC and apparently Alberta as well is that you cannot share the report that you did for the seller with the buyer. The buyer has to get their own inspection. But yeah, I've never heard of pre-listing inspections being illegal anywhere.
Thank you, Alan. Now, folks, we are getting close to that hour mark, and we have still over 200 people listening in, Alan, and I don't want to put any pressure on your shoulders, but is there a chance we could perhaps extend for maybe 15 minutes or so more? It's up to you. Obviously, of course, sir, we can always take these questions offline and try to address them elsewhere, but we've got a lot of spirited people here listening in, twisting your arm inch by inch.
Yeah, I know you are. Let's carry on until if I start to nod off, you can just sign off for everybody.
This is where we need to get a sponsorship with Red Bull or something. We'll sip right now. You're good to go. All right. Well, John, so we've got a couple questions by John. The first one was about the provincial things. This is another John. If a realtor hires you, I actually love this question because we deal with a lot of Carson Dunlop. Realtor hires you, right? Who's the one signing the contract? Are they actually your client?
Generally speaking, the client is the seller, rather than, and as I maybe mentioned very briefly, I can't remember if I said anything, but even if the agent pays, whoever pays for the inspection isn't necessarily the client. So to me, the client of a home inspection is someone who's going to rely on the report, and the seller relies on the report briefly while they own the house, but they also rely on the report to help them sell the house. So to me, the seller is always the client, not the agent.
Thank you. And Gary would like to know, would you advise the seller to fix a crack in the foundation pre-sale? I didn't say how extreme, so maybe two cases. Typical minor crack and maybe something like some horizontal minor cracks that may be more significant. Up to you.
Okay, yeah, minor horizontal cracks are kind of an oxymoron. I'm very nervous when I see horizontal cracks, but minor ones for sure I wouldn't fix. Frankly, most fixed cracks look worse than the crack themselves, in my opinion. So it's hard to make them disappear visually without covering them up. And again, what would another home inspector say? Think about the buyer's home inspector coming through. And if it's a crack of substance and you're not able to make a call on it, which I absolutely understand, that might be the time to say to the seller, why don't we get a foundation contractor to come in here and evaluate the problem if there is one? And then what you can do is, let's go worst case scenario. Foundation contractor comes in, says there's a significant problem. You ask them for a quote, and so it's $5,000 or $10,000 to fix the problem. Okay, so you now have two choices. You can say, here's the problem. It's $5,000 to $10,000 to fix. The seller can fix it, or the seller can say, hey, we lowered the listing price $10,000. Here's a quote to fix the repair. You can do either one. And so to me, you address the issue looking at it from the perspective of the buyer, and what would the buyer think? What would the buyer's home inspector say about this crack? So if it's shrinkage cracks, the small vertical cracks or cracks radiating out from a basement window below, most home inspectors are going to say this is pretty typical, not a big deal, watch for leakage through the crack, otherwise don't do anything. And I would leave it at that. If it's more substantive, I might get a price to repair the problem, and then make the decision whether the seller repairs it or passes it along with the reduced price.
Fantastic. Thomas, I'm not sure if I've ever seen you in our webinars before, at least asking questions. So if that's the case, or I'm misguided, but welcome to our community. Do you think offering a slightly discounted price on a pre-listing inspection would be a good idea to get the word out in my market, to get the ball rolling, just for a short duration, right? Discounts. Do you have any like kind of promotional offerings by chance at Carson Dunlop for maybe repeat agents or things of that nature?
We don't, but I think that's not a bad idea. Sort of kind of an introductory offer. We understand this is new. I did mention towards the end of the presentation that you might do a free one for a top agent to try and get them to understand the process and how it can work to their advantage. So yeah, if now understand that in our marketing talk, we talked about not competing on price. And I would say the reason I went to a free one rather than a discounted one is because for most agents and sellers, the obstacle isn't so much the price as the concept, that they are having trouble seeing it as a huge asset and an advantage, which it really is. And so if you give me a really good deal on a car that I don't want, it's still not a good deal to me. And so I think you need to separate the issue of price from the issue of, do they see the value and want it? So you can keep that in your pocket or you can put it forward as an incentive. But if people don't understand or agree with the concept, a lower price probably isn't enough to move the needle in your favor.
Thank you so much for that, Alan. And next question. So with regard to contracts, you have sort of your standard contract, and Dana would like to know in this regard. But then when it comes to these different sort of tiered services, like do you have a different contract for a buyer or seller's inspection? And then beyond that, do you find that you have, like, I guess, multiple contracts to accommodate these different, well, not just buyer and seller, but like you mentioned, like a summary page or these additional services that you provide? Are there like clauses that you offer, or is it just the same contract regardless if it's a buyer or a seller? Can you give some light on that by chance?
Yeah, it's the same contract either way. So, and the additional services that we offer are all embodied in our basic contract. So, and by the way, we try and keep, a lot of people have different contracts for different things. We try to keep our contracts simple, similar, and universal. So we offer a service for thermographic imaging, for example, at $195. And by the way, sidebar, please don't give away thermal imaging. It's too valuable. So we have a service that is an add-on that people can take advantage of. And we, instead of having a separate contract, one with and one without thermal imaging, we just have a discussion about the thermal imaging process, and it just says if included with this inspection. So when we offer ancillary services, it might be mold, it might be radon, whatever it is, I would encourage you to keep your life simple and have your contract address those things just with the words if included in this inspection, so that you don't have to be bouncing around. Because if you do that, eventually you're going to screw up and have the wrong contract attached to the wrong report. So that little sidebar on how we manage contracts. Sorry, Brian, I'm rambling when I'm trying to say, hey, this is people have already been patient with us for over 2 hours, and I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I'm twisting your arm, but I mean, questions come, questions get answered. You're so good at it. All right. So just in reflection, outside of our monthly newsletter and the webinars, any other services you recommend they subscribe to as far as general information, or is it something that we're just going to continue to post more frequently and regularly? Maybe not obviously in large webinar format, but just more short videos and things so you can get more insights. But anything beyond the Horizon community outlet that you could recommend they get more information from?
Yeah, a lot of the associations have great information, and very often from a different perspective, certainly from mine and from Carson Dunlop's. But most of them have newsletters, communications. A lot of them have good continuing education available online or free access to. So there is no shortage of information out there that's good. And there's Working Real Estate Magazine, which is for both appraisers and home inspectors out of the Southwest. Interesting publication. They have lots of interesting articles around home inspection. There are lots of places to go, and frankly, if you go to a lot of the franchises, larger inspection firms, a lot of them have very powerful blogs and articles on their websites. I would encourage you to go and look at either competitors you respect or large organizations that you know of. They don't have to be associations, but home inspection companies. There are there are lots of groups around helping people build your business, and they have valuable information. So we are one source. We are anything but the only source. So there's lots of good stuff out there. Online meeting group run by a friend of mine called Hollis Brown. If you don't belong to an association or a meeting group that you can get to, his sessions are often, they're almost always really good. And I think he's running them monthly. For a while, he was doing them twice a month. So that's another opportunity. And again, that's Online Meeting Group, or OMG, and Hollis Brown is the leader of that. Another long answer. Sorry, Brian.
Not a long answer whatsoever. So the reality is, folks, I appreciate your time. I certainly appreciate Alan's time. And as we're getting closer to, well, almost 10:15, just a couple things I want to do. First, we're going to end very shortly. Just everyone needs to get on with their evening, and we've got a lot of good information that we have to digest. We have over 140 people still in attendance, and I'm going to ask each and every one of you a favor. So I'm looking here, and I have to just sort of evaluate. Probably got about 50 questions, maybe give or take, that we haven't been able to address. And I'm going to ask Alan if he'll spend some time with me, not today, but when we have the opportunity, hopefully before we can send out the newsletter, to address these questions as succinctly as possible in a supplementary video. However, there's 145 of you in attendance. So when we send out that email on Friday, if on next Monday I don't see at least 200 people reviewing that, I'm not going to ask Alan to do a continuation Q&A where we record that separately for you to listen to. However, if you want to get your questions answered beyond what we've been able to do this evening, please listen in, watch, hear the answers to the questions you and others were not able to get addressed this evening. And then next month, pardon me, in January, hopefully we can continue that trend where we can continue to address questions for almost an hour. And then we will take the time to address the questions we weren't able to address in a follow-up video, so you can sit back, watch them at your leisure, whenever it's convenient for you and your family in certain cases. So sorry to interrupt, Alan. I don't mean to impose, but at this stage, I think you've gone so far, and I think it may be best to just do a good night.
All right. Well, that sounds good. And I can't thank you folks enough for sticking around. Over 2 hours is a long time to sit in one place, and my suspicion is your glass is empty unless you've been smart enough to go and refill. So I think you've all earned a little refreshment of whatever flavor. So again, thanks to Brian for hosting it and making my life easy around all of this. I don't have to fight with technology. It just bends to Brian's whim, so that's good. And by all means, we will find a way to get you answers to your questions if we haven't answered them so far. That's the goal of the exercise. So thank you for sticking around. Thank you for your questions, for your participation. It's less than perfect communication tool, but we're doing the best we can under the circumstances. So thanks again for that. And Brian, you can take the rest of the day off.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for choosing Horizon. And if you're not part of the Horizon community already, you're welcome to consider it at any time. We'll be glad to walk you through the program step by step. Thanks, Alan, for a wonderful evening. Thanks for your insights. And have a blessed evening, everyone. Good luck on your inspections to come.